I still remember the last time I saw my granddaughter Sophie before everything changed. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day when everything smells like wet pavement and cold coffee. Sophie had her little rain boots on, yellow with ladybugs, and she was jumping into puddles just outside Emily's house while I waited in the car to drop off a bag of groceries. I waved to her through the window, and she giggled, her blonde curls bouncing with every jump. She was only 5, but she always called me Grandma in that sweet, high-pitched voice that melted my heart. I never imagined that moment would be the last I'd see her for months. It started subtly. First, Emily stopped answering my phone calls right away. Sometimes she'd call back after a day or two, brushing it off with sorry, busy with the kids, or Greg needed the car, so we were out all day. It wasn't like her. We used to talk every day, even just for a few minutes. We had a routine. Sophie would grab the phone, and Liam, who was only 2, would babble nonsense in the background. I used to laugh about how much noise their house carried, the joyful chaos of a young family. But within a week, the calls slowed. Then they stopped altogether. I sent a message, just a soft, thinking of you. Let me know if you need anything. No reply. Then I tried again, something a bit more direct. Hey, is everything okay? I'm a little worried. I haven't heard from you. Still nothing. That Friday, I showed up at their house with a tray of baked ziti and a new coloring book for Sophie. I knocked, then rang the bell. I could hear voices inside. I even heard Sophie say, "Gran is here," but no one opened the door. I waited for 10 minutes before walking away, heart pounding, tears prickling behind my eyes. I didn't understand what was happening. Had I done something wrong? 3 days later, I received a text message. Just a few lines. "Mom, Greg and I have talked, and we've decided that we need space. You've become emotionally overbearing and critical. We both feel it's not healthy for the kids to be around that. Please don't come by anymore, or we'll try to contact us for now. I hope you'll reflect on this and understand." I must have read it 30 times. Overbearing? Critical? Greg and I never saw eye to eye on much. That was true. He was the kind of man who liked to keep people at a distance. I always felt he had a fragile ego, easily bruised by advice, even the kind given with the softest of intentions. I remember the time I offered to help repaint their living room when they moved in, and he took it as a passive insult, muttering about how I didn't think he could do anything right. But I never imagined that my relationship with Emily and the kids could be cut off just like that. On his word. I sat in my kitchen for hours that evening, tried to piece it all together. I wasn't perfect, no mother is, but I had been there every step of the way. I was in the hospital when Sophie was born, holding Emily's hand while Greg waited outside, too anxious to be in the room. I was there when Liam was colicky, walking him through the halls at night, while Emily cried in the bedroom. I had watched their dog when they traveled, lent them money when Greg's consulting gig dried up, and covered daycare fees once when Emily's paycheck was late. And now, I was toxic? I didn't respond right away. I couldn't. The words felt too raw. I didn't want to sound offensive or angry. So I sat in silence, hoping this would all blow over. That Emily would realize she was being manipulated. That maybe she'd call a few days later, apologize, say it had all been a misunderstanding. But the call never came. Instead, more silence. Weeks passed, then a month. I saw Sophie once from afar, through the fence at her preschool. I didn't go up to her, I didn't want to cause a scene, but I stood at the corner for a few minutes, just watching her. She had grown taller. Her ponytail swung when she ran. She looked happy. That should have been comforting, but instead it broke something inside me. I was being erased from her life. Eventually, I wrote Emily a letter, handwritten, not typed. I told her how much I missed her and the kids, how I didn't understand what I'd done that was so damaging. I asked her to speak to me, even if it was hard. I begged for honesty. I told her I loved her unconditionally. There was no reply. I asked around gently. My neighbor had seen Greg at a gas station and said he seemed tense and controlling when Sophie spilled a drink. One of Emily's friends, someone I used to chat with when dropping off the kids, told me, "I don't want to get involved, Margaret, but you should know Greg hasn't always been kind when talking about you. He says you're manipulative and trying to take over their parenting." That word again, manipulative. I was stunned. And yet, beneath the confusion and heartbreak, something darker simmered. I started to think back. Greg had always found ways to isolate Emily. He deleted her Facebook account for safety. He discouraged her from working full-time, telling her the kids needed her. He hated when she went out with friends and always insisted she bring the children instead. And whenever I raised concerns, never in front of the kids, never with hostility, had either shut down or spin the story to make me the problem. But I still didn't think he could cut me out so completely that Emily would allow it. Then came the final blow. I received a notice from the Children's Daycare Center, officially informing me that I was no longer authorized for pickup, nor permitted on the premises. I had once been listed as the emergency contact. I had picked up Sophie a dozen times when Emily was stuck at work, and now I was legally nothing. I cried for 2 straight days after that. Not silent tears either, gut-wrenching sobs, the kind that leave your throat raw and your chest bruised. I was grieving a family that was still alive, but suddenly unreachable. But after those 2 days, something shifted in me. I decided I wouldn't be erased. I opened the old folder on my phone, labeled for safety. I had created it long ago, after an incident when Greg had raised his voice at Emily during a birthday party. Something about the way he looked at her, tight-jawed and low-voiced, threatening but careful, had made my instincts flare. So I began recording when something fell off. I didn't do it to catch anyone. I did it because I feared that one day someone would need proof that I wasn't a villain. Now I was the one being painted as dangerous. So I watched the videos. One showed Greg pacing the living room, drink in hand, shouting at Sophie for leaving her crayons on the floor. Another caught him muttering angrily about Emily's nagging mother. A third showed me comforting Liam while Greg banged drawers in the kitchen. Each clip was quiet, unedited, real. I hadn't planned on using them. But suddenly I realized this was the truth I'd been denied the chance to share. And maybe, just maybe, this was the only way to reach Emily. I didn't sleep the night. I rewatched those videos. I sat at my kitchen table with a lamp casting a dull yellow halo across my phone screen. The soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional passing car outside, the only sounds accompanying me. I watched and rewatched each clip, absorbing not only the behavior I documented, but also the expressions on my grandchildren's faces. Sophie's big eyes brimming with confusion. Liam flinching when Greg slammed a cupboard. Emily's tired, lifeless face whenever Greg was in one of his moods. They haunted me. I had saved those recordings out of instinct, a quiet part of me aware that someday someone might question the dynamics in that house. I never imagined that someone would be Emily herself. The betrayal of her message still lingered in my chest like a stone. She truly believed I was the toxic one. And that was more painful than anything Greg had ever said to me. The next morning, I called Helen. She'd been my friend for almost 40 years. We taught together at the same elementary school before I retired. She was the practical one, never given to drama or panic. If anyone could help me think clearly, it was her. I needed to come over, I said. It's serious. I need your brain. She was at my door in 20 minutes, bringing pastries and a notepad like we were preparing for a classroom strategy meeting. I showed her the videos one by one. She said very little, only pausing to take sips of her coffee and make the occasional note. After the last one, where Greg barked at Sophie to shut it because she was crying during a football game he was watching, she set her mug down slowly. Well, she said, this isn't just bad parenting. This is emotional abuse. I swallowed. I think hearing those words out loud made it more real. I'd always tiptoed around naming it. Greg didn't hit anyone. He didn't scream all the time. He didn't drink himself to unconsciousness. But he was oppressive, controlling, demeaning, unpredictable. And now, he'd taken my daughter and grandchildren away from me under the guise of protecting them. Helen looked me dead in the eye. You need to speak to someone who knows what to do with this. I wasn't thinking about revenge. I didn't want Emily to get in trouble or to blow up her family. I didn't even want Greg arrested. I just wanted my daughter to see the truth, that I wasn't the problem, that her children weren't safe emotionally. That cutting me out wasn't the solution, it was the cover-up. Helen knew someone who worked in child welfare advocacy, a woman named Teresa who had worked as a family mediator for over a decade. She's not about breaking up families, Helen said. She's about keeping them healthy and safe. She'll know what to do. I was skeptical. Mediation sounded like something for divorcing couples, not estranged mothers and daughters. But I agreed to meet her. The next day, I found myself sitting across from Teresa in a small office above a bookstore downtown. It smelled like lavender and paper. She was kind and calm, in her early 50s, with short graying curls and a warm, quiet voice. She didn't rush me. She asked me to start from the beginning and just talk. I told her everything. I started with the sudden cutoff, read her Emily's message, then explained the history between me and Greg. I described the small but consistent signs of emotional control, how Greg isolated Emily, manipulated situations, punished the children emotionally. Then I showed her the videos. She watched each one carefully, without interruption. When the last one ended, she looked up at me and said, "I believe you. And I also believe your daughter might not see the full picture because she's been living inside it for too long." That was the moment I started to cry. Not the kind of weeping I'd done before. This wasn't sadness. It was something closer to relief. Someone believed me. Someone saw what I saw. Teresa explained that she could send a formal recommendation to Emily and Greg, requesting a voluntary mediation session. "It's non-threatening," she said, "but opens the door. I've seen many families reconcile this way. Will she come?" I asked. She shrugged softly. "We can't force her, but if she does, we'll make it count." A week later, I got a call from Teresa. Emily agreed to come. Alone. I didn't sleep the night before the session. I paced the living room, clutched a cup of tea that went cold in my hands, rehearsed what I'd say 100 times. I wanted to plead and scream and hug her all at once. But I knew I had to stay composed. This was my one shot. When I walked into the mediation room, Emily was already seated. Her arms were crossed tightly, and she looked thinner than I remembered. Her hair was tied up in a messy bun, and dark circles hung under her eyes. She didn't smile. She didn't say anything. Teresa greeted us and laid out the ground rules. No shouting, no blame, no accusations. Only truth, empathy, and the goal of understanding. I spoke first. I told Emily how much I loved her, how I never meant to overstep, how my heart had been breaking from the silence. I told her that I wasn't there to attack her marriage, but to explain why I had concerns, that I needed her to see what I'd seen, not to punish Greg, but to protect the kids, to protect her. Then Teresa asked if Emily was ready to watch the videos. Emily hesitated. "Why do you have recordings?" she asked, her voice sharp and defensive. "Because I was scared one day something would happen that nobody would believe," I said. "Because I never wanted you to think I was the liar Greg says I am." She stared at me, jaw tight, but she gave a small nod. Teresa played 3 clips. She chose carefully, ones that showed Greg's mood swings, his careless language around the kids, and the way he dismissed Emily's voice in front of them. There was no yelling, no dramatic scenes, just the slow, quiet corrosion of family life. The kind you don't notice when you're in it every day. Emily didn't cry, but her face changed. Her jaw slackened. Her eyes darted between the screen and the floor, then back again. When the last video ended, the silence was unbearable. Then she whispered, I didn't know it looked like that." "I know," I said gently, "and I'm not blaming you. I just want you to see that I'm not your enemy." For the first time, she looked me in the eyes. The session didn't end with hugs and tears. Emily said she needed time. She asked for a week. Teresa told her that was okay, and I left with no promises, but with hope, real hope, that maybe my daughter had seen enough of the truth to question the story she had been told. The week that followed the mediation session was the longest of my life. I waited in a kind of suspended stillness, afraid to hope and too exhausted to panic. I didn't call, didn't text, didn't push. Teresa had advised me to give Emily space, and I followed her advice with painful discipline. Every part of me wanted to check in, to hear her voice, to know what she was thinking, but I knew if I overstepped now, I might push her back into Greg's narrative. So I waited, pretending to read books I couldn't focus on, cooking meals I barely touched, and staring out the kitchen window for hours as if Emily's car might appear on the driveway like a vision. On the 6th day, she called. Her name flashed on my screen, and for a moment I couldn't move. I just stared at it, frozen in place, as though answering too quickly would make the moment vanish. Then I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and pressed accept. "Hi, Mom," she said softly. Her voice didn't carry anger. It was tired, hesitant, but real. So at first, a pause. "Can we talk? In person?" "Of course. Whenever you're ready. I can come over tomorrow. Just me. Is that okay?" My chest ached with relief. Yes. Yes, of course it is. The next day, I set the table for two. I made chamomile tea, her favorite. The clock ticked loudly in the quiet house, and I kept glancing at the time as though I was back in the classroom, waiting for a parent-teacher conference. When the doorbell rang, my hands trembled as I opened the door. Emily stood there, small and pale, under a gray sweater, her shoulders drawn in as if bracing for wind. We didn't hug, not yet. She walked in slowly, scanning the room like it was unfamiliar. We sat at the table, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. She ran her fingertip along the rim of her mug before finally saying, "I watched the videos again. At home, after the session." I nodded, but didn't speak. "It was hard," she continued. "At first, I told myself you edited them, or took things out of context. But the more I watched, the more I remembered how I felt in those moments, and how often I brushed it off, because Greg always had an explanation. He was tired or stressed. He always had a reason for why I was overreacting, or being too sensitive, or siding with you over him." Her voice cracked on the last sentence, and she blinked quickly, looking away. "I believed him for so long," she whispered, "and then I became him." "No," I said gently. "You're not him, Emily. You're someone who trusted the person she loved. There's no shame in that." She looked up at me, her eyes glossy with tears. "But I hurt you. I cut you out. I let him convince me that you were dangerous, that you were trying to control everything, and I didn't even question it." I reached across the table and placed my hand on hers. "You were trying to survive inside a world that didn't give you room to question. You're questioning now. That's what matters." We sat like that for a while, quietly holding on to something fragile and old and still beating between us. Eventually, Emily said what I hadn't dared to hope for. "I want you to see the kids." I held my breath. "But I think we need to go slow," she added. "For them, and for me. I'm still sorting through a lot. I don't want to do anything messy. And I need Greg to think this is just about mending fences. He can't know about the videos." I swallowed hard. "You're still afraid of him?" She looked down again. "Yes, and not in a he'll-hit-me kind of way, but in the way that I don't recognize myself around him anymore. The way I filter everything I say. The way I brace for his moods. I've been doing it for so long, I didn't even realize it wasn't normal." There was a knock at the door then, so gentle it barely registered. Emily's eyes widened. I told him I was going to the grocery store. We froze. For a moment, we just stared at the door like two deer caught in a silent moment of shared instinct. The knock came again. Then silence. Emily checked her phone. "A message from Greg. Where are you? You've been gone an hour. Is everything okay?" She didn't reply. She simply put her phone face down on the table. "Can I come back next week?" she asked. "Whenever you want," I said. She stood, hesitating by the door. Then she turned and hugged me, sudden, tight, trembling. It lasted just a second longer than I expected. When she pulled away, I could feel the weight of what she didn't say in that embrace. The next few weeks unfolded like a cautious thaw. Emily came once a week, always without Greg. At first, she came alone. Then, one afternoon, she brought Liam. He was shy at first, hiding behind her legs. But then he saw the stuffed dinosaur I had saved for him, and his face lit up. It was a tiny moment, but it filled the entire room. A week later, she brought Sophie. That reunion broke me in the best way. "Grandma," she screamed, launching into my arms. I knelt on the floor, holding her close, smelling her hair, memorizing the sound of her breath. She babbled nonstop about her school, her favorite cartoon, and how she'd learned to whistle through her teeth. For that hour, it was as if no time had passed. But when Emily called her to leave, Sophie clung to me. "Can I stay here?" she whispered. I looked at Emily. She was watching us closely, her face unreadable. "Not yet, sweet pea," I said softly. "But soon, okay?" Sophie nodded, trusting me. As they left, Emily turned and said, "She remembers everything, you know? Every song you used to sing, every story. She never stopped asking about you." That night, I cried in bed. Not from grief this time, but from something close to grace. But the joy was mixed with a quiet dread. We were walking a tightrope. Greg still had no idea that the wall he'd built between us was cracking. Emily had become skilled at hiding things, her emotions, her doubts, even her decisions. She didn't trust him with her full truth. And that said everything. One afternoon, Emily and I sat in the garden while the kids played with bubbles. She sipped iced tea and watched them with a faint smile. "I'm thinking of separating," she said, her tone flat. I didn't react. I just let her talk. "I'm not sure when. Or how. I don't want to tear up their lives. But I can't live like this anymore. He's watching everything. Every move I make. I've started using a second phone." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Do you feel safe?" I asked. She shrugged. "Safe enough. But I don't feel free. And I want to feel free again." I nodded, gripping her hand. "Whatever you decide, I'm here. No judgment. No pressure. Just here." She leaned her head against my shoulder. "I wish I believed you sooner." "You're believing yourself now," I said. "That's what matters." And in that moment, I knew the tide had turned. Emily had seen the truth not just with her eyes, but with her heart. The silent evidence had spoken, but what made the real difference was her own awakening. She wasn't just rebuilding a relationship with me. She was reclaiming her own voice, her motherhood, her sense of self. And though the road ahead was uncertain, I no longer feared the silence, because it had been broken. The last weeks of summer passed like the slow closing of a wound, tender, cautious, but undeniably healing. Emily began spending more time at my house with the children, no longer always checking the time or glancing at her phone with nervous eyes. The air between us, once taut and brittle, had softened. She had started to smile more. Laugh even. At first, it came in small bursts, when Liam mispronounced a word, when Sophie made up a dance routine in the living room. But eventually, it was real, whole, the kind of laughter I hadn't heard from her in years. One quiet Thursday morning, while the kids were playing in the backyard, Emily stood at my kitchen counter peeling an apple. I watched her from across the room, how her hands moved automatically, muscle memory from time when we used to do this together after school. She looked over at me, as if reading my thoughts. "I spoke to a lawyer," she said, so casually I almost didn't register what she meant. I set my mug down slowly. "About separating?" She nodded. "Greg doesn't know yet, but I wanted to understand my options. Custody, finances, everything." I didn't ask what she planned to do next. I knew it was a decision that had to be hers, and hers alone. She had to claim it for herself, not feel pushed or swayed. I simply said, "That's brave." She smiled a little. "It doesn't feel brave. It feels terrifying, but I know it's right." The truth was, I'd started to fear the day she would go back, that she'd decide it was too much trouble, too risky, too unknown. But in that moment, I saw a quiet resolve in her that I hadn't seen in years. She wasn't waiting to be saved. She was saving herself. 2 weeks later, she filed for legal separation. Greg didn't take it well. He called her a traitor, accused her of brainwashing the kids, claimed I had manipulated her, poisoned her against him. There were days when Emily would call me crying after one of his outbursts, her voice shaking as she replayed his words. But she didn't go back. She didn't fold. She got a small apartment across town, a 2-bedroom with worn carpet and peeling cabinets, but it had a lock she controlled and windows that let in light. The first time I visited the new place, Sophie greeted me at the door in pajamas, clutching a bowl of popcorn. "Grandma," she squealed. "We're watching a movie on the floor." Inside, the apartment was chaotic and mismatched, blankets spread out, boxes half unpacked, toys everywhere. But it felt more like home than the cold, quiet rooms of the house she'd left behind. Emily looked exhausted, but content. Her face carried the marks of stress, but also of relief. For the first time in years, she had space to breathe. Greg tried to contest the custody arrangement, claimed Emily was mentally unstable, even tried to use my earlier estrangement as evidence of her emotional instability. But Emily's lawyer had the videos. And while they were never introduced in court, they didn't need to be. The simple knowledge that they existed was enough to make Greg back down. His threats grew quieter, less frequent. Eventually, he settled for a shared custody agreement that gave Emily primary residence of the children. He moved into a rented condo nearby. For what we later learned, he was never interested in full-time parenting, only control. Emily enrolled Sophie in a new school and found a part-time job at a local nonprofit. I started watching Liam during the afternoons. We built block towers, fed ducks at the park, and made a tradition of grilled cheese Fridays, where we tried a new soup recipe each week. I could see the difference in both kids. They laughed more, whined less, and began sleeping through the night again. Sophie once said, as she lay on my lap watching cartoons, "Mommy doesn't cry in the bathroom anymore." It broke my heart and healed it at the same time. One sunny afternoon in late October, Emily asked if we could visit the local pumpkin patch together, like we used to when Sophie was a toddler. The four of us, me, Emily, Sophie, and Liam, piled into my car, stopping at the bakery on the way for cinnamon rolls and hot cider. At the patch, Sophie insisted on finding the most perfect pumpkin in the entire universe, while Liam rolled in the hay and came up with grass stains that took 3 washes to get out. Emily smiled the whole time. That evening, back at her apartment, while the kids napped on the couch, she turned to me. "I never thank you," she said. "You don't have to. I do. Not just for the videos or the lawyer. For not giving up. For never turning bitter. You could have written me off. You had every reason to." I shook my head. "You were never the enemy." I knew that. Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't. Not until recently. I reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear like I used when she was a girl. Sometimes we lose ourselves trying to hold on to something broken. But when you're ready to let go, you start to find your way back. And she had. Not all at once. Not in some grand, movie-ending kind of way. But in the quiet, defiant way a person chooses to reclaim their life day after day. Over the months, Emily and I grew even closer. She started talking about going back to school to finish her degree. She signed up for therapy. She even joined a support group for women who had left controlling relationships. It was hard. Some days were messy and uncertain, but she never looked back. As for Greg, he remained in the background. He saw the kids on weekends, mostly for short visits. Emily had learned to document everything, to set boundaries, to no longer explain herself. He didn't like it, but he complied. The control he once held over her was slipping through his fingers. One spring afternoon, almost a year after the fallout, we celebrated Liam's 3rd birthday at a park near my home. Emily invited a few neighbors, so the new friends she'd made at work, and me, of course. I brought balloons and the same chocolate cake I used to bake for her when she was little. As we sang Happy Birthday, Sophie climbed onto my lap, hugging me tightly. "I'm glad you're back, Grandma," she whispered. "I never really left," I said, kissing the top of her head. After everyone had gone and the sun began to dip behind the trees, Emily helped me gather wrapping paper and paper plates. She turned to me and said, "It's weird. I used to think I had to protect the kids from the world, but I was protecting them from the wrong person." "You did what you could with what you knew," I told her. "And when you knew better, you did better. That's what being a mother is." We loaded the car, and as I drove her home, I looked in the rearview mirror. Sophie was asleep, clutching a balloon. Liam was snoring gently in his car seat, and Emily sat beside me, her face turned toward the window, peaceful. We had come full circle. I had once been called toxic, dangerous, a threat to my own family. But the truth had a way of cutting through the noise, not through force, not through anger, but through patience, through love, and through the quiet strength of never walking away. And in the end, that love brought my family back. Not the same as before, but stronger, wiser, and whole.